thinking we're sitting here together another couple of hours to listen, think about, analyze, contemplate, internalize the meaning of all these words, which are about the mind, about happiness, about suffering, and how to get free of suffering and how to achieve our potential, and therefore to help others do the same. That's why we're here. Think like that. Okay. So yesterday we talked about the first scope of practice, the lowest scope, the teachings and practice are suitable to the disciple of the least capability, if Lama Zopa translates it. And the essence of all that, the essence of it, the culmination of all that is abiding by the laws of karma, which is actually where you begin to practice. And we looked at how that's the basic principle that runs the universe as far as Buddha is concerned. And so if we don't want future suffering and do want future happiness, we need to be the one who creates it. We're the boss, you know. So we looked at roughly those laws. We didn't go into much detail. And if you have any questions about karma, maybe we should talk more about it, because we only had 2 hours yesterday, but we've got 4 today. So we're looking also at once we start to abide by the laws of karma, we become less neurotic, less low self-esteem, less miserable, less attached, less angry, less jealous, less blaming, less victim. That's the consequence, you know. That's really powerful, because we start to realize that we're in charge. We're not some innocent victim of the outside world. You know, somebody's got a secret plan, and we sometimes get happiness and sometimes get suffering and don't know why. That's how we live our lives. That's why we suffer so much. Buddha's view is that no, we're in charge. We have to learn to become in charge, and that brings much more stability and clarity and happiness and fulfillment. So then, of course, what I'm saying here is karma, the law of cause and effect, is a really brilliant example of the first level of dependent arising to prove emptiness, which is what we're leading to in tomorrow, which is in the great scope when we study the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. So this is priming our mind ready, you know. As I've been saying, the explicit teaching is to control your body and speech, so because you don't want suffering, stop harming others. And then now the next one today, we've been talking about the next level of practice, the second scope, the middle scope, the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the middle capability. We now start to get to the root of the problem, which is the mind. And we're starting to look into the Buddhist model of the mind, how it functions, what it is, and how it's the source of all our happiness and suffering. Finally, what goes on in the mind is the actual source of happiness and suffering. Which doesn't mean the outside world doesn't play a role. Obviously it does. But the Buddha says we're giving far too much power to the outside world than it actually has. You know, we're missing the function of our own mind. And we're missing, in the earlier scope, we're missing our past karma that we bring into this life with us. So here we're looking at this division of all the contents of our mental consciousness, the neurotic, deluded, fear-based, I-based states of mind that are necessarily disturbing, but crucially, delusional. And this is the second way that we are now being prepared to really get more easily to understand dependent arising and emptiness, which we discuss tomorrow, which is in the great scope, in the 6 perfections. Because the root delusion, the colloquial term for when we grasp at the inherent self, for this general ignorance, marigpa, that sees everything as having an intrinsic nature, which is the root of our problems. We call it ego grasping, if you like, or self-grasping when it's related to the grasping at the me. So we really have to learn to do tomorrow when we go into this. We see very clearly how this ignorance, this marigpa, unawareness, this ego grasping, at its root is a complete misconception. So we start to learn about that here in the middle scope. Attachment is a misconception, anger is a misconception, jealousy is a misconception, pride, depression. And it's a surprise to us because we call those emotions, you know, surprise to think that they are in their nature conceptual stories that aren't in sync with reality. That's exactly what Buddha is saying. So here the explicit teaching is to learn to be sick of attachment, sick of anger, sick of jealousy, because we're fed up, because we realize that just the having of them right this second is why we suffer so terribly even just now. And that actions done on the basis of those will cause even more suffering. So this really does take time, because it's a view that is not the view we have in our world. It's a very, very different analysis, you know. So the thing that's important to talk, and we discussed it a bit before, but I want to go into it in more detail here, because this is what we really start to learn to understand when we actually study the mind seriously. I mean, we know words like love, anger, depression, pleasure, concentration. We know these words, Let's look at the Buddhist analysis of them. Let's exactly look at the Buddhist model and where these fit. Because this is the secret to success, not secret. This is the key to success in beginning to really unpack and unravel your mind and learn to know it intimately and well. Now, we get this concept when it comes to learning how to make a cake, learning how to, analyze anything. You have to have detail, precision, clarity, clear definitions, and then you can learn how to be a carpenter, learn how to make a cake, learn how to grow flowers. We understand you need that clarity and precision, clear definitions, and you have to learn it and study it and then continue to practice again and again until you can make the flower, make the computer, make the cake. We get that. This is exactly the same approach that this model of the mind has in relation to getting happiness, not giving up suffering. I'm being quite literal, So if that's true, we better know what Buddha means by these words. You've got to get a definition. If you're trying to make a cake, you can't just make up what you think a teaspoon is. You can't just speculate about a gram. I mean, we know that the key thing for even the simplest recipe, cooks will do their recipe 20 times before they put it anywhere near a cookbook, because they want to be accurate. That is a surprise to us, to think that we need that level of accuracy and precision when it comes to knowing how to be happy, knowing how to stop suffering. But that is exactly what is needed. So, example we used before, who was it? Maybe that was, I think it was Kimberly's example in relation to her husband. So she mentioned attachment, she mentioned love, and she mentioned pleasure. They're three separate, specific states of mind that have their own specific function. So we need to understand them. So, these are examples. One of each is an example. The first one, attachment, is an example of a negative, deluded, neurotic, disturbing states of mind. Love is an example of the second category, valid, reasonable, appropriate, virtuous state of mind. The first lot of the cause of suffering, the second lot of the cause of happiness. And the third one, pleasure, whatever word she used, there are levels of pleasant feelings and there are levels of unpleasant feelings. So this third category, they call them neutral, but that misleads us because it sounds like that means they're not important. That's not the meaning. The meaning is that they're neither negative, neurotic, delusional, disturbing and the cause of your suffering, nor are they virtuous, positive, valid, reasonable and the cause of your happiness. Try and hear these. These are very precise meanings here, okay? So this third category, which is neither of those, we all have them. And these are that's why I like to call them the mechanics of your mind. A person who's a murderer or a person who's a meditator, whether you're a sinner or a saint, whether you're a murderer or a meditator, whether you're a thief or a good person, you need concentration, you need intention, you need attention, you need discrimination, you need concentration, you need good memory. There's many, many, many of these in this third category that are crucial to understand. And many of these are functioning every second. So the degree that we can, even hold a conversation like this and be reasonable in remembering some of the words and understand them, we need to have intention. We need attention. We need discrimination. We need concentration. We need good memory or mindfulness, at least some of these. If they're not working properly, we are an insane person. You can't do anything. You couldn't take one step. You couldn't do any action if these aren't working reasonably well. But they're neither negative nor positive. A murderer needs them and a meditator needs them. It's in that sense that they're called neither this nor that, but they function and they're crucial. A hawk needs incredible discrimination, which is the ability to distinguish between this and that. From a half a mile in the sky, can see exactly breakfast and has intention, attention, concentration. They all come together and together they're working. And then the result is he gets breakfast in his mouth, That's why Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. Mindfulness these days is very confusing to us. First of all, there's a use of the term within Buddhism. We call it mindfulness meditation. Well, it's actually called single-pointed concentration, shamatha. And mindfulness, we put all these bells and whistles onto this word. It's just mindfulness is one of the many parts of our mind that all have to work together, whether you're the hawk getting breakfast or whether you're trying to watch your breath. So concentration is a very specific, it's a concentration technique. Mindfulness actually is a word that refers to one very precise part of your mind. That's the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. Now you can know if you don't have that, you are called senile. You've got Alzheimer's, or you've got short-term memory, or you've got dementia. You don't remember from moment to moment what you're doing. That's called mindfulness, quite literally. It's not a holy state of mind. Thieves need it, murderers need it, snipers need it, hawks need it. Hear the meaning here. Now, what's fascinating, you've got to hear this properly, is that in that category of neither positive nor negative, which are neutral on the mechanics, there's another one that's simply called feeling. Now, we use that word as a synonym for emotion. You know, that's not the meaning here. Not at all. Not at all. It's a neutral state of mind. It's neither a negative nor positive. It's something primordial and just natural within the way we're constructed, you know. So feeling, there's only three kinds we could ever have: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Well, from this perspective, let's forget the neutral. Let's not even worry about those. We're concerned with the pleasant and the unpleasant. So what are some other words for these? What are some synonyms? Well, the word pleasant is a very kind of mild word, isn't it? So you can have a spectrum of pleasant feelings, all the way from the most mild pleasant feeling to the most cosmic ecstasy in the universe. They're all called pleasant feelings. There's just a question of degree, isn't it? Now, you know what another word for this is called happiness. Now, when we use the word happiness, like, you know, people having all these conferences these days in psychology looking at what happiness is, and we have about 97 varieties of it, but it's very complicated. We make it very complicated. Well, the Buddhist view is very simple. You either have happy feelings or unhappy feelings. You either have suffering feelings or happy feelings. You either have pleasant feelings or unpleasant feelings. So unpleasant feeling, from the most mild unpleasant to the most intense unbearable nightmarish experiences, they're called unpleasant feelings. That's called suffering. Suffering is another word for an unpleasant feeling. Happiness is another word for happy feeling. But our trouble is, because we are so addicted to believing that the delicious cake or the handsome boyfriend are the cause of the happy feelings, of happiness, that we conflate them. We actually, so, you know, you say to me, Robina, tell me about your happiness. Why, are you happy, Robina? Yes. So I'll tell you my happiness. I will describe the boyfriend. I wouldn't know how to describe my happy feelings. If I'm upset and despairing and suffering, I will describe my ugly boyfriend, because we assume the cause of my happiness is the cake or the boyfriend. And even we think that is the happiness, that is the suffering. We have, in our memories, we've remembered the event, the thing, the action, the person. So we conflate that with the happy feeling and the unhappy feeling. That's a mistake. A cake is not a feeling. A cake is not even the main cause of happiness. It is one of the causes, but it's a secondary cause. It's a catalyst, if you like. The boyfriend is not the main cause of the happiness. The boyfriend is the catalyst. The happiness is an experience in my own mind, a moment of pleasant feeling arising. It's through the sensory consciousness and the mental consciousness. It's the mind. Happiness is the mind. Suffering is the mind. Now, so in the example Kimberly used, she discussed attachment, a state of mind that is negative and neurotic in its nature, that is not in touch with reality, that is completely therefore delusional, that is a total exaggeration of the deliciousness of the object. Let's say for her it was the cake. It wasn't the cake, it was probably her husband, but never mind that. So that's the cake. Attachment over-exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. Attachment is this energy inside us coming from terrible dissatisfaction, this emotional hunger that is like a junkie wanting every millisecond pleasant feelings. Attachment is therefore trying to find the object such that when we have contact with it, pleasant feelings are triggered. This happens all in a millisecond, and we're programmed. We have a body and a mind that's constructed to do this. This is from eons of practice. So nothing wrong with pleasant feelings. As Lama Yeshe would joke, the more pleasure, the better, dear. We think he started sounding naughty. Sounds like a sin, doesn't it? Pleasure. Oh. So pleasant feelings is simply called happiness. Now, this is what's an interesting point. Buddha's telling us, hey guys, I have found methods of how to get pleasant feelings all the time. That in fact, pleasure, joy, bliss are the natural state of your mind when it's unencumbered by the delusions. So this is the point here, one point. Nothing wrong with wanting happiness. Buddha would say that every being in the universe is driven by the wish to be happy. Every being in the universe is driven by the wish not to suffer. And he says, I've found a method, people. I've found a method. This is the wisdom wing. Forget compassion wing. So right now, being in samsara, being junkies, attachment is really the mind of a junkie that feels bereft all the time, missing, not having, not enough, despairing, not enough, emotionally hungry all the time. That's the suffering of attachment. And then we, because of attachment, believe, therefore we hanker after something. And so, of course, depending upon the karma we have, it'll be to kill somebody, to jump on somebody, to have a piece of cake, you name it. Attachment is limitless in its capacity to find things or events or activities that, because of habit, that we believe that when we do them will trigger happy feelings. And that's true. That's what happens. But we misunderstand it. So the trouble is now, we all want happiness and we don't want suffering, but all we seem to be experiencing is the lack of happiness. So we're always hungry. And so attachment's job, like this vampire-ness, is to search for, to think about and then find the cake, the boy, the sound, the smell, the fish to kill, or whatever the activity might be, because of habit, such that when you have contact with it, pleasant feelings are triggered. That is what Buddha means by samsara. And he says, this is the source not of happiness, but of more suffering. The more you get, the more you want. And it's not meant to be punitive or mean. He says, when we analyze it, which is what we have to do, we're going to find that it's a mistaken method. But in fact, when you get the cake, it is true. It's a fact. Pleasant feelings are triggered when the cake, first, the fantasy about the cake, the thought of the cake, the getting of the cake, the anticipating of the cake, all the build up to get the cake. Then you make the cake or you buy the cake and there it is. Your eyes see that shape and color and there's just shape and color there. But your mind running berserk with attachment makes it look so divine you practically want to faint. You can't wait to get it in the mouth. And all this anticipation is happening spontaneously. And you're believing in the picture that your attachment has created. And you've got to get it in the mouth. That's the end result. And you're waiting for that pleasure to be triggered. That's what happens. So there's some pleasure triggered by looking at it. There's some pleasure triggered by thinking about it. But the real pleasure comes when you stick it in the mouth, isn't it? And not this hole, not that hole, this hole. We know the one. We're programmed. So we know there is pleasure triggered the moment you put the cake in the mouth. But look what happens. You can't believe it's so delicious. Wow, the most delicious cake. And what's happening already as you're enjoying that mouthful, the attachment, the emotional hunger isn't satisfied, is not satisfied. Already you're hungry for the next mouthful. Already it's rushing ahead, hungrily wanting the next mouthful. Not satisfied with that mouthful, with that moment of pleasure. And the tragedy is that moment, the first one is the best. It's downhill from there. If we analyze our experiences, but you're not satisfied. So you've got to have another mouthful, hungrily anticipating the same bliss, but it's slightly less. And we know that, but we can't bear to think about it because it's too painful because we don't know any other method. So have another mouthful and it's still delicious, but part of you begin to get anxious already now because it's getting less pleasure. And your stomach's getting fuller. And as this process continues, and by the fifth piece, you know that you would now vomit if you ate one more mouthful. And you sort of think it's like, oh, I'm so full, I'm so happy, but you're not happy, you're so distressed. You're going to have acid reflux, you're going to get diarrhea, you're going to put on a pound. Look at the nightmare, look at the distress. So what happened to the pleasure? It was in the beginning, the first mouthful was best, but we're not satisfied. So attachment is a bottomless pit of dissatisfaction. And the tragedy is we know if you're a junkie or an alcoholic, or, you know, the more you get, the more you want. And my mother's statement just blew my mind. I tried to think about it. The more you get, the more you want. It's unbelievably powerful. We all know it. Buddha didn't make this up. It's the observation of anybody with half a brain. The more you get, the more you want. That's the suffering of attachment. But we can't bear to hear it. Why? Because we can't think of any other method to get happy feelings. We're desperate, you know. What else hell can we do? Where else is happiness besides this? Whether it's the best boyfriend in the universe, whether it's the best children in the universe, whether it's the best sex in the universe, whether it's the biggest amount of money, the biggest house, no matter what it is. This is not being sarcastic. It's not trying to be punitive. Buddha's not trying to tell you shouldn't have houses and boyfriends. No, attachment over-exaggerates their deliciousness. And then what is there left? This is why the second kind of suffering, the first kind of suffering, another way approaching to the 3 levels of practice, the first kind of suffering is conquered by abiding by the laws of karma. The first kind of suffering is a suffering of suffering. So by killing and stealing and lying and harming, that ripens this future incredible suffering of suffering, which is those bad things happening to you. This second level of practice overcomes the second kind of suffering, which is what Buddha calls the suffering of change and what we actually call happiness. And the cause of this one is attachment. It's simply called the suffering of change. It's hardly a no-brainer, because what began as pleasure, eating the cake, turned into the suffering of suffering by the time you eat the 5th piece. It now causes you to vomit. So it turns from happy feelings to unhappy feelings. This is logic. This is science. This is not religion. It's just that we don't know any other method, so we just take it for granted. So we have to analyze this process. Break it down technically, analyze it, and become convinced about what Buddha is saying, not in a punitive way, but in a practical way. But it's kind of hard because this attachment is primordially deep. It's, I mean, subtle beyond imagination. It's just the grossest level we're discussing, you know. So attachment, it has this utter and intimate relationship with pleasure. That's where our mistake is. So then what the hell is Buddha's answer? Okay, mate, tell me your answer. How do you get happiness, please? I want happiness. He says, I'll tell you, baby. So he says, you people think, not you people, we, he says, because he was the same. He's found this method. The normal view is happiness, happy feelings, pleasant feelings are what we get when attachment gets what it wants. And that's our method. He says that. Happiness, we think happiness is what we get when we get what attachment wants. And we do, but it doesn't last. The key is it doesn't last. And we hear this and we go, who cares it doesn't last? Because we don't know any happiness that does last, frankly, although we desperately want it to last. So there's awful tension in us, but it doesn't last. He says, no, you're mistaken. Happiness, happy feelings that will last, that won't change into unhappy feelings, the happiness that will last, that won't change into unhappy feelings, which happens to be the nature of your mind, is what you get when you give up attachment. That's it. That's Buddha's method. And all the other delusions, of course, which come from attachment. That's Buddha's method. Very simple, quite technical. But of course, it's the hardest job because we're all junkies. We're all junkies. That's our problem. That's why it's hard to do it. But this is the answer. That's it. Not complicated. So Buddha wouldn't even fill a half a page. If you want a method how to get happy, it's quite simple. This is it. This is the method. Give up attachment and the delusions. Of course, it's hard because we're primordially programmed with them for eons of lifetimes. That's it. That's the answer. So the point I'm making here as well is that pleasant feelings are neither good nor bad. So, you know, the more pleasure, the better, dear. And so now let's look at that. If the cake isn't the cause of happy feelings, and if the boyfriend isn't the cause of happy feelings, and if the mean boyfriend who beats me up and gives me up for another version isn't the cause of my suffering feelings, then what is, please? Of course, this is Buddha's particular point. Well, guess what? Your delusions are the cause of happiness. The delusions are the cause of suffering. Your attachment is why you suffer. Your anger is why you suffer. Your depression is why you suffer. The jealousy is why you suffer. These are why we suffer. This is too hard to hear. It's too shocking because we hear it as blame. Surely the boyfriend plays some role. Yep, he does. But what we do is just spend our lives trying to change the outside world, isn't it? We spend our lives trying to manipulate the outside world to make it all perfect and get rid of all the ugly stuff, because we think that they are the total cause of happiness and the total cause of suffering. That's our big mistake. We don't even factor our mind in at all. As Lama Zopa says, the vast majority of all humans on this planet, and he's talking even about the most intelligent ones, have absolutely no idea that what goes on in our minds plays any role at all in our lives. Please hear those words. It sounds too shocking to be true. What it means is we know we're angry, we know we're jealous, we know we're happy, but we think it's the mere response to outside stimuli. We don't think it plays a role in my unhappiness. No, my boyfriend is the cause of my unhappiness, and I'm the innocent victim of his horrible actions, and he has caused my anger. That's what Lama Zopa means. We know we're angry, but we don't think it plays any role. We think the boyfriend is the total cause of the suffering. And then if we're blissfully happy, we don't think the blissfully happy plays any role. We think the boyfriend is the cause of it. So we just got a wrong analysis, Buddha says. It's not a moralistic analysis, it's a technical, scientific analysis. We've got to look into it to prove it to be true. It's not easy, but that's what we have to do. Don't just believe Buddha. That's lazy. So you can't do this work very deeply until you've done the first job. Calm the servants of your mind down. Calm down your body and your speech. If you're running around berserk, following everything you feel, doing everything you feel, saying everything you feel, it's impossible to look in your mind. That's why you got to practice abiding by the laws of karma first. Understand that it's your stuff. You created it. Control your body, control your speech, live in vows, purify your mind. Then this prepares you to go to this next level, you know. Unpack and unravel this chaos in here, make sense of it all. And crucially, to distinguish between the facts and the fictions. That's the job of being a Buddhist. Any questions about anything? About anything at all? No? Karma, anything about karma from yesterday? We didn't do enough about karma, really. But the main point was to see how it is a first example of dependent arising, cause and effect. Okay. Yes. Good. Sweetheart.
Hello. I have one question, Robina. I practice meditation quite regularly, and I really enjoy it, and I don't quite know where to draw the line between enjoying it and being attached to it. I don't want to get attached to my meditation practice.
But tell me, does it matter what are you saying a particular meditation is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not analytical meditation. It's rather shamatha. Well,
okay, I get you. No, I get you. I understand. Okay. This is an interesting point, Mario Deal. I'll tell you this. The fact is, shamatha is in the Lamrim. We're going to discuss this tomorrow. In the Lamrim, it's taught at the end of the Bodhisattva path, at the most advanced level of the Bodhisattva path. It's the fifth of the six perfections of the Bodhisattva. And the sixth one is the realization of emptiness or insight on the basis of shamatha. And they're taught, but in reality, they are high school, they're middle scope teachings. In fact, concentration meditation, shamatha, is a Hindu teaching. It's not even Buddhist. But the Buddha took it with him very happily. And then then the second mode of meditation is called getting insight. So insight meditation is this is also an insight into emptiness. That's also a Theravadan teaching, a high school teaching, wisdom wing teaching, because when you achieve your own liberation, you're not on let's say you're not on the Mahayana path, but you're on the Hinayana path, you've got to have concentration, shamatha, and you've got to have the insight into emptiness. And then you eventually achieve your own nirvana, your cessation of suffering. And then in one life or other, when you achieve that, then at the end of that life, you disappear into bliss. You're finished, you're gone, you're done. So they are in their nature Theravadan teachings, not Mahayana. But it's interesting. The point is because shamatha, which is the accomplishment of single-pointed concentration, which, as we know, is described in terms of 9 stages of cultivation, and they describe it in detail in all the texts. And this is, again, as the Hindus invented this well before the Buddha. It's this amazing skill, incredibly focused skill that, I mean, if you do it seriously, you've got to give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll and go to the mountains and spend a couple of years probably, if minimum, in order to accomplish single-pointed concentration, in order to accomplish this shamatha, this calm abiding, such that your mind is at this very subtle level. It's beyond conceptual, beyond sensory. You've got it effortlessly, and every time you go there, you can go there effortlessly. To get to that level, that takes a while. You've accomplished the 9 stages of single-pointed concentration. Now, Lama Yeshe, when he taught us, always brought it very down to earth, and he tried to always inspire us and energize us to want to practice meditation, because he kept trying to tell us about the amazing potential of our own minds, which we never thought about. We just all thought we were creeps, you know. So in Mahamudra, have you read Lama Yeshe's book, Mahamudra?
I went to a retreat.
It's actually the 2 modes of meditation. It's shamatha and concentrate, and then insight into emptiness. It's a blissful book. It's called Mahamudra, How to Discover Our True Nature. It came out last year or the year before.
Okay.
Yeah, year before. It's a blissful book, and I know because I edited the thing. It's incredible. Lama's teachings were so blissful. But the point is, in this book, and Lama always tried to do this, they don't often do it in the texts. He describes some of the qualities that you would accomplish having got single point of concentration. He describes the bliss. He uses these words: rapture, ecstasy, the likes of which we can't even remotely imagine. Even Venerable Rene, this wonderful Swiss monk, I don't know if he's taught there, he lives in California, and he's been a meditator for like 40 years, serious meditator, off and on for years and years and years in serious retreat. And I interviewed him even back in 95 in Mandala about one of his 2.5 year retreats at Erceling in Spain, right, in the Sierra Nevada. And it was single point of concentration. And he said maybe he touched upon the 5th of the 9 stages. And one of the things he said to me was, Robina, the joy that I experienced, this is Buddha's point, and Lama Yeshe trying to express this to us, the joy he experienced in his mind in meditation was so superior to any joy he'd ever experienced through his senses. Now, the point about this is this: if you get into this, get shamatha, and you're not on the Mahayana path, or if you think you're on the Mahayana path and you get shamatha and you get these levels of ecstasy and bliss, the likes of which you can't imagine, and you've still got some attachment, and you have this incredible, I mean, the qualities you'd have, like the clarity of your mind is inconceivable when you've really got it. And you can get it every time. It's inconceivable, some of the qualities you've got that we don't even remotely posit as possible in ordinary psychology. So the commonest, the biggest fault would be, the bliss would be so brilliant. Who the hell could care less about sentient beings? You give up on sentient beings. So this is why one of the reasons, even sounds so simple, is why it's taught in the framework of bodhicitta, where you can never lose the plot because you're driven by unbelievable compassion. So of course there's attachment there. If you're an ordinary person and you haven't realized emptiness and you're going to experience bliss in your meditation, honey child, of course there's going to be attachment. That's why you've got to be well prepared. So Venerable Rene said to me also, he said there's no way in the world he was ready to go into this retreat unless he'd been a monk living in vows, done lots of purification, done lots of study, and even done lots of teachings. That is what prepares your mind. You've studied the mind in depth. You know what the hell is going on. So you know how to navigate all this and you know how to interpret it because you've studied the mind. Now, this is why, as Lama Yeshe says, the number of people, not Lama Yeshe, I'm saying myself, the number of people I've met over the years who, for some reason, because of past karma, do a bit of meditation and then experience incredible bliss. And they, as Lama Yeshe says, they start to meditate and they end up in a psychiatric hospital because they've got no idea what their mind is. They've got no idea what the mind itself is. They have no idea where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions come from, because you also get clairvoyance when you develop this shamatha, just naturally. You've got no idea why you have all this bliss. So if you've got lots of attachment and lots of delusion, you can just go berserk in writing these berserk novels about you're a realized being. You go crazy. People go mad. Are we communicating, dear?
Yeah, no, totally. Thank you.
That's the answer to my question. So study the Dharma, darling. Know what the hell is going on. Know what is bliss. Know what is attachment. Know what's going on. Understand the mind. And then you'll be able to navigate it based on bodhicitta and wishing to realize emptiness, and you won't lose the plot.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? There's a really good point. Thank you. So important. Any other questions, you people?
There's a question in the chat.
Good. Yes, darling.
A request from Adele. She says that the blame point was interesting. I think the point that you were making about blame earlier. And please, can you detail about blame a little further?
Well, okay. I think if when we hear religion and we hear creator, and I'm not blaming religion. This is who are the people who've articulated all these views over the centuries? We human beings have. Human beings all over the world, all over the centuries, all over the universe have come up with different presentations of the universe, right? Australian Aboriginals, I always talk about them. I mean, they were 40,000 years left on their own in peace until the wretched white people came along. Their views of reality, which developed over 40,000 years, I swear to you, are so abstract, I can't even understand them. They call it dream time. I mean, that's human beings. Then you've got the Muslims and the Indians, and this every culture you go to, you scrape away a few layers of centuries, you're going to find people who thought this. All over the universe are humans coming up with viewpoints about the universe. So they're all viewpoints about the universe. Okay. So the commonest view we have in our culture, coming from all the Arabic religions, Hinduism, Judaism. In the Western world, it seems to be Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They're all these brothers and sisters in this little spot called Israel. Look at the fights they all have, the dramas, a little piece of land. I mean, you could jog across Israel. It's so small, This drama there, all these different views coming together. So they're all got a similarity that they posit a person called God who is the boss, who creates the universe, creates me, creates the laws, and therefore usually spoken in terms of as the ability to punish and reward. Because as I always quote my Jesuit priest friend told me, a sin by definition, a naughty action, is something that is against God's will. That in fact is what makes it naughty. The fact that God said. Now you think of that view, that's the view of morality we have in our world. Mummy says, don't do this. And if you do this, you'll get punished. We have that view. So since we're tiny, we come brought up with all these views not to do what mummy said this, and daddy and the police and God and Our Lady and everybody. And if you've got a lot of fear, if you've got a lot of this view, you live in total panic and fear of being blamed, of being accused, you're naughty, it turns into guilt, I'm bad, I did this. Why you think guilt? What is guilt? Guilt is internalized. You're washing the dishes. I use a simple example, and you break a cup. Immediately you look around to see if somebody saw you break the cup. You immediately feel guilty. Why do you feel guilty? Because you've internalized mummy telling you shouldn't break a cup. You're naughty. So you've internalized that view. Now, don't blame your mummy because you got born with this view. This view is called ego grasping, that has the dualistic view of blame, reward, punishment, good, bad, and all the other rubbish. So the more strong you have that view, the more guilt, the more blame, and the more anger you have. Now, for some people, it manifests as unbelievable victim. Victims don't think they're angry. We're all victims. A victim is a person who really believes everybody else is so evil, they cause my suffering, and I'm an innocent victim. But what they're actually experiencing is unbelievable rage, but they would never admit to rage. And we love being victims. Ego is a victim. I've been done to. So that's the view of guilt. I am bad, or you are bad, one or the other. So either some people have I am bad, or you are bad, but it's the same thing. What do you think anger is? Anger is you did this and you did this and you did this and you're a bad person. What do you think guilt is? I did this and I did that and I did this and I'm a bad person. They're the same philosophy. They're called anger. They're called anger. Very simple. Victims have anger, but they feel it's justified because look what those people did to me. It sounds brutal how I say this, but if we analyze our own minds, this is how we are, So blame is the consequence of the dualistic view of a self-pity innocent victim, me, who gets bad things happen to me, who doesn't deserve it. And this is something that again sounds so heavy, but let's analyze this word deserve. It's so fascinating to me. This is Buddhist analysis, We have attachment and we then have anger. Attachment is the hunger to always get what I want. And listen to this, it's the assumption that I only deserve the good things. It's so deep. Attachment is an assumption that I deserve only the good. And then anger And there's a multitude of responses like aversion, annoyance, irritated, frustrated, violent, anger, or depression. They're all a spectrum of the same state of mind. Aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants, or when it gets what it doesn't want, or when it's thwarted, and that's 1,000 times a day. So aversion is this outrage. How dare that happen? Because I don't deserve it. So deserve is completely inbuilt into attachment and anger. Attachment is the assumption, like the hubris, the arrogance, the assumption that I only deserve the good things. And now but analyze this. It's so fascinating. When you say I deserve something, there's an assumption that someone out there somehow should give it to you, isn't it? Like, you never would say, I always use this example, you would never say, who put weeds in my garden? I don't deserve weeds. That's what anger is. How dare there be weeds in my garden? You don't say that. Why? Because it's your garden, so you own the weeds. So there's no concept of deserve or not deserve. They're yours. It's your garden. Drat, I forgot to pull them out. But saying I don't deserve weeds, you're sort of looking for who put weeds in my garden. Who's the blame? Where's the blame? You know, where is it? Who did this to me? I don't deserve this. This is how we live our lives. This is ego's voice. It's schizophrenic, Lama Yeshe says. No one's doing it to us. It's your garden. Now, your life is your garden. This is the view of karma. Everything you meet, from the mother to the sounds, the smells, the taste, the people loving you, hating you, giving you, taking you, raping you, giving you $1 million, treating you like an angel, whatever it might be, it's your karmic appearance. Every tiny bit is your garden. And whatever's in your life is your garden, and whatever's in your garden, you must have put there, baby. So deserve is not even relevant. So now, look at attachment. When you get the nice things, when people are nice to you, the assumption is we sort of like, well, of course I should get the nice thing. We take our good, and this is why we take our good things for granted. I mean, in the discussion, you know, yesterday with Kimberly, not being rude to Kimberly, she's had incredible suffering with this car accident, you know. But we all do the same thing. We all, the one bad thing that's happened to us, when we hear that we must have caused it, it is shattering to us to think we must have done something bad. It overwhelms us. But as I pointed out to Kimberly, and it's for all of us, if you started listing all the good things that she's got in her life, and all of us the same, a reasonable human life, people take care of you, got some friends, some money in the bank, some house, some million good things. But we don't ever, I've never yet in all the years I've been a Buddhist, ever have one person ever asked the question, Robina, why do good things happen? It doesn't even occur to us to ask the question. Why? Because the hunger, the emotional hunger of attachment is so intense. It's just the assumption, well, yeah, give me more, please. I deserve only the good. So we don't even notice we've got the good because we just assume it's the default mode. We assume it's normal. That shows how deep the hubris of attachment is. So we are outraged when we see the weeds. Who put weeds in my garden? But then how dare there be? Where are the cauliflowers? Where are the flowers? Where are the herbs? I deserve flowers. I deserve herbs. And that means where is somebody who should be putting herbs and flowers in my garden? I deserve money. How come I haven't got any money? I deserve happiness. I deserve a boyfriend. I deserve to be treated well. Look how we feel. Look how we feel. Like that exactly. That is the nightmare of attachment and anger. It's just torture, all based on false assumptions. All these delusions are layered upon each other, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, rooted in the root delusion of the assumption of an intrinsic me in the first place. They all stem from that, you know. So this is like this is hell. This is the mental hell we live in. And we never question these assumptions. So blame, reward, punishment, deserve, these heavy, heavy, heavy words we use, you know, all based on this dualistic, view, you know. Anna, mute yourself, Anna.
I unmuted myself to ask a question, really.
Who is
just
talking? Where's Anna? I haven't finished yet, though. Who
Oh,
wants
I'm
to ask?
sorry.
Let me see your face, Anna. What happened to you?
My camera is a bit moody when it comes. Hi.
All right. Let
Hi
me give
there.
you this longer.
It's-
That's good. Can you just wait for a bit and then I'll ask questions in a second? Let me just finish this,
Sure.
darling.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. Very kind, darling. Thank you. So just this attachment and aversion, you know, I mean, when we first learn about it, we learn it about a very simple way. We've got to learn, we've got to unpack and unravel, like I'm talking, from hearing and seeing our own minds, you know, it takes time. They're all false assumptions. They're all wrong views. They're all mistakes. They're all based on not on reality. And these are why we suffer. And they're the source of blame, resentment, how dare, anger, you know, all this other drama. They're the source of it. It's very fascinating. So anyway, Anna, tell me your question, darling. Anna.
Yeah, I was just wondering, the weeds in your garden kind of thing struck a chord, not because I garden, but I work a lot with chronic pain patients who objectively have a lot of, you know, objective reason for pain.
Absolutely.
And I can see how there's a huge amount of overlay with, I don't deserve this, and I'm angry, and somebody's got to be to blame and stuff. But even if you peel all this away, there is still an objective reason for their pain. So
the same reason of my friend on death row for 17 years in Florida, who was completely innocent, accused of killing 2 policemen, whose husband was executed, and when she went to the execution, his head burst into flames, who lost her children, whose parents died, and took her 17 years to get out of prison. There's plenty of objective reason there as well. Do you see what I'm trying to say? There's no argument about that, darling. There's no argument here about bad things happen to us. There is no question. But the revelation when we start to practice is that we assume the suffering we're experiencing is coming from that pain in the body, where we assume that all the suffering is coming from being on death row innocently and being innocent. No, the way we interpret it with attachment, the outrage, how dare this happen to me, the anger, the pain, the jealousy, the resentment, the rage, the despair, they are states of mind, and they are the overlay, Anna. And it sounds brutal and cruel, but this is Buddha's whole point. Pain is real. Being on death row is real. Your husband punching in the nose is real. But what the Buddha's telling us, and this is the revelation, when we can start to see that the role our mind plays in the way we interpret those events, and we start to change that, then the suffering becomes radically less. That's
so it says that you'd still have some suffering there from the objective pain you have, or the fact you're still on death row, but it would just be lessened and maybe slightly more distanced.
Not even slightly, radically. The more brave you are, like my friend, this woman I always quote, the example of being on death row, she wasn't even a Buddhist. She's just this amazing woman. She's out of prison now, Sunny, and she wrote her memoir, and she just had this extraordinary ability, you know, to be able to reinterpret this nightmare. I mean, this is the thing that is the revelation. And, you know, so I remember this one time reading 2 different people, about her and about another guy on death row, both innocent. So the guy who is what we would consider normal, this nightmare, and there's so many people with injustice. I mean, right in America right now, continually people being let off death row after 25 years. I mean, the system is so corrupt, it's unbelievable, such unbelievable injustice. And none of this injustice is denied by what we're discussing here. It doesn't sort of counteract the injustice. There's still outrageous injustice. These things, terrible things happen. So I read about Sunny, this amazing woman who was hitching with her husband back in the 70s in Florida. She's this hippie with her kids. And then they got picked up by 2 guys, something like this. The guys got stopped by the police. The 2 guys killed the police and blamed the hippie. So they're on death row. And just she wrote her memoir about it. And at some point, her husband got executed. I mean, even his head burst into flames. Can you imagine the nightmare, you know, these dramas, one after another. And she talked about how she was in solitary for many years. All she had was a Bible. She just talked about, she said at one point, finally, I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So she said, I decided, you know, that she told me personally, I saw her, you know, when we were discussing things on the phone, because she's out now, she lives in Ireland. She said, I realized, one thing she said was, I realized that I could choose how to think about this. So literally she said, which sounds very romantic, I decided I am not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I am not in a cell. I'm in a cave. Now, saying those words once is not enough. Saying one time your reinterpretation of your headache is not, you've got to practice it. So this is the whole point in Buddhism. Even the most advanced levels in Buddhism, I'll talk about the other guy in a minute, even in the most advanced levels in Buddhism, because we're trying to develop this incredible compassion to be a benefit to others, and what stops our compassion from growing is the presence in our own mind of ego grasping and anger and attachment and all the rubbish, then there's a whole level of practice which is called learning to transform problems into happiness, to totally reinterpret. And this is also rooted in the teachings we're getting to tomorrow with the teachings about emptiness, that nothing has an intrinsic nature. Everything is how we interpret it. So, and we can see this in ordinary daily life, you know. I mean, I used to do kung fu. I would get punched and kicked by doing kung fu. Now, a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick. But depending on whether it's kung fu or your mean boyfriend is depending on whether you accept it or get angry. So that proves immediately that being punched is not intrinsically the cause of suffering. This sounds shocking to us, but it's a fact. If I can learn to have a happy mind when I got punched, and my kung fu teacher said when I got punched, I should apologize to my partner because I didn't get out of the way, you know. So everything, you can see everything is a question of how you interpret it. And this is really runs deep in the whole Buddhist approach. So we've got, if we can change something, the Buddhist approach is if you can change something, please change it. Kick your boyfriend out, tell him to stop punching you, get the key and get out of death row if you can. But what if you can't? And this is the major level of practice. And it's again, not punitive, it's not diminishing the pain. But the point is when we really realize if we've got lots of anger and how dare, which is the suffering some of us have when bad things happen, that's the cause of the nightmare. But if you have the view of karma, for example, you radically reconfigure your view of why it's happening to you. And that's what I was saying yesterday. When you really start to have the view of karma, you instead of the innocent victim, you realize that you created this suffering. And then by thinking that, and it doesn't sound like initially that would be the result, but it brings more courage, it brings more acceptance. And know when your mind changes, your experience of the physical changes. This is the point. And of course, it's not easy. My job, if I were helping you, if you were very sick, I wouldn't sit there and give you a lecture. I would love you and take care of you and nurture you and give you pills and help you nourish you, help you deal with your incredible pain. You know, but if a person asks me, you might give an answer, but it's tough work. Oh my God. But all this approach is rooted in the whole approach in Buddhism about the mind and how literally over many lifetimes we cause our own happiness, cause our own suffering, and can reconfigure the whole thing and be in charge of it. You with me, Anna? Anyway,
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's just interesting to sort of put that across in a way that's not sort of perceived by many people as condescending.
No, I know it's exactly right, but that's where it's got to be in the right framework. And so I know lots of people, and you surely must know this now, I've heard about lots of people in the medical profession, all kinds, are working with methods to help by changing the mind to help us alleviate our pain. So a person has to want that kind of method. You can't stuff it down someone's throat. I mean, when I go to prison and talk about my friends in prison, I give lectures and talk about karma and things. I can't force it down people's throats. I give them the view. You know, it's up to people to take it or reject it or use it. I mean, you can't be like a policeman. That's too heavy, you know. Do you understand? And that's where your job, you have to know where a person's at and give them whatever's appropriate. So if they're full of misery and rage and anger, you just love them for who they are, you know, and try and alleviate their suffering, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, thank you. Good, thank
you
so much. Really good point. What else, people? Any other questions, sweethearts? Huh?
So, Robina, you were talking about turning our problems or turning suffering
into happiness,
into an opportunity for discovering happiness.
Well, that's right. That's the view. Yeah.
So,
go on.
Having pain or like chronic pain or something. I mean, anybody out there who's got it, it's awful, and I agree with you. But if you can't get out of it, like you were saying, then you should maybe get excited about it, because
darling, I know it sounds easy to say those words, get excited, but it's a great, you see, this is the point. It's this ability to see things differently, which is really the best way to put it, that's really we've got to grow. So if I'm for example, I'm in a relationship with my boyfriend. So let's just say I've never heard of working on my mind, and I'm an ordinary person with lots of attachment, and I'm clinging and hungry for his love, and he starts being mean to me. I'm going to feel, normal. That's how we all are. Join the universe. I'm going to be angry, jealous, resentful, hurt. I don't deserve this. I'm such a nice person. Why is he beating me? Are you seeing my point, Kimberly? That's the normal person. So then I start to practice. Let's say I start to hear about Buddhism and I like it. And I start and so as I'm moving along in this relationship, I start to hear the Buddhist view. I hear the Buddhist view about karma. I must have some relationship with this guy. And you're working slowly. It's like you're working gradually and slowly, first with the view of karma. And even that's a revelation in itself, because that's what I'm trying to say yesterday. The view of karma, when it really becomes experiential, is a profound antidote to the typical view of ego, which is I'm an innocent victim. Naturally we feel, this is something that's we don't notice all these views in our mind. If we're brought up in our culture, which is a materialist philosophical view, and you didn't ask to get born, and suddenly, like you, out of the blue, some car runs over you and you have all this agony and pain, then of course you're going to be angry. And of course you're going to think, I don't deserve this, because of course you didn't do anything to this person who ran over you. So naturally you're going to think, I don't deserve it. Naturally, you're going to be angry and distressed and overwhelmed by the suffering. And if I'm in a relationship with a boy, and he's beating me every day, and I've been a nice little girl all my life, of course I'm going to be shocked. There's no logic for why I should experience this. I don't have a view of karma. I don't have a view of a creator. I just think nobody asked me I just got born. You kind of see my point, Kimberly. Our minds are driven already by layers and layers of conceptions that we don't question. That's why I suffer. So then I start to take the Buddhist view, and it's a revelation to me. I start to realize, well, my goodness, I created the cause. I must have a strong karmic connection with this guy. Straight away, you start to open your mind. You start to reinterpret differently. You start to get more control over yourself. You start to realize, well, listen, do I want to continue? You even start to have more power and not be a victim. And I'm going to start thinking, well, you know what? There is suffering in this relationship, but do I want to be in this relationship? When you're a complete victim, I'm not being mean about us. You're paralyzed. You can't make any decisions. Like, if I'm miserable and I haven't started to work on my mind yet, and I come into you and talk to you like you're my girlfriend, and I tell you about this creep Fred, what he does, and you go, Robina, it's outrageous. Why don't you leave him? Oh, no, I couldn't do that. I've got nowhere else to go. Oh, I've got no money. No, he really does love me anyway. So then I can't make that decision. And then you say, well, Robina, if you can't leave him, maybe you can try to interpret it differently. Maybe you can see it differently. And I'll go, no, I can't do that. He's still a creep. So in other words, we're paralyzed if we're a victim. You can't change your mind, and you're even too scared to leave the job or the relationship. That's the nightmare of most people's lives. We're paralyzed. We don't think we can do anything, and that's the nightmare of our suffering. So now you begin to work on your mind. You start to realize you've got a choice. That's what my friend, living in a nightmare, in this hell of death row, innocent for years and years, husband executed. She lost her children. Her parents got killed in a car accident. She's totally innocent. This other guy I wanted to mention, who we call normal, he went completely out of his brain. And as long as he could have a voice, he would be screaming, I did not rape and kill that woman. I did not rape and kill that woman. So we would think he was normal, and she's just kind of weird. She changed her mind and became happy. So the fact of the matter is, if you've gone to that guy, I said, well, sweetheart, there are methods you could learn. Like, I've got a friend called Sunny, and she's in death row just like you, and she's learning to be happy. She's learning to change her mind. She's learned yoga. She's learned meditation. She's learned to be patient. She's learned to get the most out of her experience. She's learned to not go crazy, not buy into the victim mentality. She's learned, he will just think you're insane. And then he would accuse you of causing him, blaming himself. I'm allowed to be angry, we say. I'm allowed to be a victim. Look what they did to me. That's the nightmare of our suffering. So when you start to practice, and then I start to say I'm practicing and I'm taking responsibility and I'm abiding by the laws of karma, and I'm realizing I created the cause for this, as rather than thinking I'm an innocent victim, already I'll become more happy. And then I'll have ability to think, well, if he's no longer going to change, I might as well get the hell out of here. And that might be the sensible decision. That can only come if you've got a brave mind. And then even further, I might make a decision to stay with this guy because I realize there's some karmic connection and it's worth it. And he's helping me practice every day. I'm helping to practice patience and forgiveness and generosity. I can see his good qualities, and there's something worthwhile in here. So I can learn, and then even I get to the compassion wing, and I want to actually benefit him. And then I'm able to reinterpret this experience and be glad that he's a bit mean and grumpy and ugly, because this is an opportunity for me to work on my mind and get rid of my own delusion so I can become more marvelous. So it's a very powerful, advanced view, but we know it in our world. We talk about the number of people who know, including you, when bad things happen. people find an opportunity in it to learn from it and grow from it. And that's the general attitude. Of course it's difficult. God Almighty, it's difficult. But this is the Buddhist approach. I mean, running with this view. So we can only do it according to our capacity, you know. But again, the bottom line that Buddha's saying, which sounds so shocking to us, is the degree of our suffering and happiness is not caused by the outside. It's caused by the mind, by how we think, by how we interpret. This is his view all the way, not just slightly, but totally. And that's what's so outrageous. But we can only go one step at a time, Kimberly. We can't do more. We can't go overnight, magic, you know. Do you understand, darling? Huh? Can't quite tell if you understand.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you.
Good, darling.
I'm thinking about what you said about ego and victim mentality, and what that does for me. Like it really affects my self-esteem. So it's a cycle of a sense of victimization, and then of course outrage and injustice, whatever.
Exactly.
And then that helplessness is like for me, it lowers my confidence in
precisely, darling. That's why when we are victims, we are paralyzed and we just ground to a halt, and there's nothing we can do. We can't see past our own nose, and it's total despair. That's the nightmare. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's it,
So
darling.
The opportunity to.
Yeah, but one step at a time, sweetheart, you know, one step at a time. And that's why I like to use these extreme examples like Sunny. And she wasn't even a Buddhist. She just had this amazing ability. I would call it emotional intelligence, that she had the ability to see that no matter how bad it came, she was able to choose the way she thought about it. That's the miracle. That's the miracle. And then the other example I always use is these two young nuns. When I was running the prison project for many years, I ran Liberation Prison Project. I still work with it a bit, help people in prison. We started it in about 1995 in California when I was based there. And in about 2003, Richard Gere invited the Dalai Lama to New York, and he also invited a bunch of former prisoners, about 20 of them, all of whom have done some kind of meditation or spiritual practice in prison. And some people like me were invited too, who were working with people in prison. So it was a very amazing day. We had all day in New York, a talk with all the ex-prisoners, and they met His Holiness. It was a wonderful day, you know. But he also invited two young Tibetan nuns. I always tell this story, but it's such a powerful example. So these young women, remember, brought up in Tibet, which at the time, I mean, even now, no, not now, it's changing radically now because mostly they're Chinese communists. So only about a sixth of the population is Tibetan now, I think. But, you know, before the Chinese communists came along, Tibet was 99.9% Buddhist, few Muslims. I think the Catholics went in the medieval, and the Jesuits went in the Middle Ages and even translated the Bible into Tibetan. They couldn't get one Tibetan, so they gave up, you know. They were happy with their Buddhism. It was very interesting. A couple of Muslims, apparently there were. So there in Buddhism for these Tibetans, and still even at that time, before the Chinese communists came along, like a sixth of the population were monastic, you know, 99.9% were Buddhists. It was just completely the view that they'd had for 1,200 years. And that view came from India, and that view was at several thousand years old. So in the same way, this is what we've got to understand. In the same way that for us in the modern world, the view of neuroscience, the scientific view, the view of materialist, the philosophical materialist view of reality is so natural to us. It's just, our minds are just imbued with it. We just take it for granted. Our mind is the brain, our mummy made us. We don't question these things. You know, we just have this view. It's automatic in us, which is the view that I didn't ask to get born, which is the view you don't know why things happen, which is the view that good things happen and bad things happen, good luck and bad luck. That's the view. That's how it is. Well, they don't have that view. Karma is in their bones and has been since they're born and has been in their culture for 1,200 years. So the view of karma is just natural to them. So they're these young women, nuns since they're little girls. They were like early 20s. They'd been tortured and sexually abused for a couple of years in the prison in Tibet. And they were just talking about their suffering. But this is the point I want to make first, again. The Dalai Lama one time said he was so sad that more and more these days, more and more Tibetans are now having anger. They were very renowned for not being angry. Now, analyze this. Like I said before, what is anger? Analyze the philosophy of anger. It's the view of how dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. That's the view you would have if you don't have the view of karma. If you have the view of karma, you would, that thought, you've got to hear this, that thought doesn't even arise in your mind. Because you have the view of karma, you know why things happen. Good things happen, you rejoice, you delight, you know you caused them. Bad things happen, you know that you caused it, so you learn to work with it, to live with it, to be happy that you're purifying it, and to navigate it. Of course, it's hard. So these nuns, they weren't angry. Now that in our culture, we criticize that. We think they're suppressing it. They're not suppressing anything. They don't have the view of why is this happening to me? I don't deserve it, because they have the philosophy of karma. Very simple. So they were telling all their experiences and their story, you know, and I suppose if you wanted to ask all those other prisoners, you could probably even argue that these young women's suffering was probably collectively more suffering than the rest of them, if you can quantify suffering. But they weren't angry, and they were telling the story, and they were sad, you know, tears. And at the end, one of them said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers, because we knew we must have harmed them in the past. And we know that because of the harm they've done to us, they will suffer in the future, because that's the law of karma. So if you benefit a person, you will get the benefit in the future. It's just the way it is. It's not punishment, not reward, not punitive, not heavy, not blame, not deserve. It's a natural law. If you sow a weed, the weed will grow. If you sow a flower, the flower will grow. It's just the nature of things. So this is the view, you know, and so of course they suffered, but their mind was brave and capable and knew how to interpret it. They were able to transform their suffering into happiness. So they probably, like my friend Sunny, who wasn't even a Buddhist, they came out of that nightmare more grounded, more compassionate, more stable, more emotionally mature than when they walked in, rather than completely broken and tortured, which is how we tend to think would be natural. So it's a pretty interesting view. Any questions, anybody? Okay, so okay. So maybe we can start into the next level, which I was going to start tomorrow. We can start it today and see how we go. You know, now let's get to the root of the problem, which is the root delusion. But before we get there, we go now, this is the wisdom wing, okay? We've done the wisdom wing. Karma is the first level, then the mind is the second level. And we're now, these are all the practices of getting rid of suffering and its causes, of renouncing suffering and its causes, which is like compassion for ourselves, and if you get even some semblance of renunciation of suffering and its causes, how would you be? You'd be much more joyful, you'd be fulfilled, you'd be self-confident, you'll be content, you'll understand why things happen to you, you won't be a victim, you won't be so up and down, you'll be a marvelous, very fulfilled person. This whole first stage of practice is for your benefit. You become this incredible person, you know? So now you can move on to the compassion wing. Now you open your eyes and you look at everybody else and you realize, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Everybody's suffering. Everybody doesn't think they're the cause of their suffering. Everybody thinks everybody else is the cause of their suffering. And everybody thinks everybody else is the cause of their happiness. And look at them up and down like yo-yos, just like me. How can I not help them? That's the compassion wing. So the next level of practice in the compassion wing is to cultivate bodhicitta, this outrageous paradigm shift in the mind that with the attitude, you now have the attitude where you've literally what do they say? What do they call it? You no longer cherish yourself, you cherish others. You've literally transformed your mind to the point you've made this paradigm shift where others now are more important than you. I mean, this alone sounds demented, you know. And this is only possible on the basis of success in the first level of practice. Not possible otherwise. That's why these stages are very incremental, you know. So all these different practices, what we're trying to do this next level is develop this incredible love and compassion for all sentient beings, which culminates in this outrageous view called bodhicitta, which is the attitude. And when you've got it, it's stable. It's not just a momentary feeling. It's a profound level of practice where you, on the basis of love, compassion, and great compassion, you now only want to help others, whoever's in front of you. And then you have this long-term wish, no matter how many lifetimes it takes, you're going to bop along life after life after life, perfecting your own mind, practicing the 6 perfections, the next level, in relation to sentient beings and in your own meditation, where you finally become a Buddha, never giving up on that. So this next level of practice, you're trying to cultivate love and compassion, basically. They're the essence of all the virtues. In the first stages of practice, you're mainly focusing on calming the body and speech down, the servants of the delusions, and then you're calming down the delusions themselves. So you're basically focusing on the weeds. You're stopping killing, you're trying to purify the past killing, and you're trying to pull out, in other words, pull out the weeds, pulling out the weeds. You're growing, you're making your ground more stable. So now you can continue your work on the mind in the compassion wing, that never changes. But now it's more, the emphasis is in relation to breaking down the barriers that ego and these delusions have created, that have created self and other. So we continue working on our minds, that never changes. The first level, like you're playing safe, you're protecting yourself from harming others, you're protecting yourself from having delusions, because that's what causes you suffering. So you're the main beneficiary of that. Others will benefit as well, but the main emphasis is on protecting yourself from creating more suffering. So now you continue working on your mind, but it's in relation to breaking down the barriers between self and other. You get a more brave, courageous level. And so here we're now trying to see that everybody's in the same boat, and we're trying to cultivate love and compassion for everybody. So the unique characteristic of compassion at this level, so we're trying to grow the flowers, in other words, the love and compassion, all these things. So there's a unique level of compassion on the Bodhisattva path that's crucial to understand. And they call it great compassion. It's like a technical term, Maha Karuna. Or I think it's the same as Lama Tsongkhapa always talks about the special attitude. So basically, what's love? Love is this thought. It's the positive. We're now looking at the positive heading. Before we're looking at all the delusions, the neuroses. Now we're looking at the virtues, the second category of states of mind. And here you've got love, compassion, so many of them, generosity, forgiveness, intelligence, so many good qualities here. So we're now trying to cultivate those. Still lessening the delusions, but proactively trying to cultivate this love and compassion. So love is this delight in someone else's happiness. If you say you love somebody, you want them to be happy. So at the moment we have that, but it's completely polluted by our attachment. So in other words, we only love those we're attached to, and we're only attached mostly to those we love. So we can tend to conflate them, but they're completely separate states of mind. Attachment's in the first category, love is in the second category. Attachment is neurotic and self-centered and I-based and fear-based. Love is spacious and valid and reasonable and courageous and other-based. They're amazingly different, but we tend to see them as coming at the same time. So then love is a delight in someone else's happiness. So then what's compassion? It's like the flip side. It's when you see suffering, you find it unbearable and you want them not to suffer. So I think in the West, we say empathy is one thing and compassion is another. I would suggest in Buddhist psychology, they're pretty much the same, When you see suffering, you think, oh my God, may that person not suffer. When you see a person happy, you delight in their happiness. So love is wanting others to be happy. Compassion is wanting others not to suffer. And they're very specific, different attitudes, So now there's an extra level of compassion that's crucial on the Bodhisattva path. And that's the one that says, not only may you be happy, not only, oh my God, look at that suffering, but it's the next level. And this is the powerful piece. It says, what can I do to fix it? It's this brave attitude, universal responsibility, sometimes His Holiness would call it. It's like a mother. She's seeing her kid drowning on the beach. Unbelievable compassion, you can't imagine it. But she's not looking around wondering who's going to save her baby. She's in that water in 1 second, whether she can swim or not. That's great compassion. It's my job to take it away. That's what great compassion is. And that is this huge enthusiasm that you get that leads you to get bodhicitta. It's my responsibility. This is very powerful and it's hard work. But that's what makes you sustain, you know, that's what makes you keep going. It's enormous optimism, and it's a logical thing that it's my job. So whenever you have this great compassion, you see others suffering, what can I do to help? Now, we all have that now. This is the point about the wisdom wing first. His Holiness always says compassion is not enough. Lama Zopa says meaning well is not enough. You need the wisdom wing. I'm putting the word wing there. Wisdom is what you get as you lessen your own neuroses. If I'm overwhelmed in my relationship with Fred, of my own self-pity, my misery, my victim, you know, I can't see past my own nose. I can't see Fred except through the lenses of my needs and my anger. But as I start to work on my mind, I remove my own rubbish. I start to see Fred more objectively. I start to see his good qualities and his bad qualities. Literally, I'm getting more wisdom. We can't see past our own noses now if we're overwhelmed by our own needs. It's obvious. So by the time we get to the compassion wing, we've radically changed our minds. We've got much more clarity and contentment and fulfillment because we've lessened our own delusions. Now I can see others more clearly. And now we can be wise with our compassion. We can see this. Look at a mother who's got a bottomless pit of attachment for her child, but as well, lots of love. But that love is completely polluted by her attachment. She gets manipulated by her child, and she just is like a little victim because she's got so much attachment, so much neediness, you know. So you don't know how to be a wise parent. You just don't, you can't see, you know. So wisdom is what imbues your compassion with courage and strength and clarity. We all need that. So you go through all these stages of cultivation. You start with equanimity. You know, equanimity is this amazing, this is the foundation, this amazing attitude. Equanimity is very, again, all these states of mind are quite precise. Equanimity is the foundation for the development of love, compassion, great compassion, bodhicitta. There's different techniques for cultivating bodhicitta. You see it in the Lam Rim. One is called the 6 causes and 1 effect, and one is called transforming, you know, transforming. I can't remember, I've lost the words. You know, you're transforming yourself for others. You're turning I forgot it. Exchanging yourself for others. Exchanging yourself for others. That's outrageous. There's a series of techniques, of 11 techniques, which is the combination of these two. And they start with this bodhicitta. And understanding this bodhicitta is with equanimity. And this is a crucial one to understand. So equanimity, the foundation upon which we will then develop stable love, compassion, great compassion, bodhicitta. So right now, what we've got, so we use the analogy of we use the example of friends, enemies, and strangers. So even as I'm talking, you can imagine right in front of you, eyeball to eyeball, a person you can't stand, you know, like maybe Catherine and her, you know, her niece's ex-husband or somebody who's harmful, brutal, been unkind to you, especially to you. And you put them in the enemy category. You mightn't call them enemy, but it's the object of aversion. To the left in front of you, your beloved, the object of your attachment, friend. To the right in front of you, a stranger. Now, who is a stranger? Well, that's 99.99% of the universe for a start. And necessarily, a stranger is a person who's neither harmed you nor helped you. So those who help us, who are the ones who do what my attachment wants, they're the beloveds. The one who has actively harmed you, whom you don't like, that's the enemy. The one who's done neither, that's a stranger. So how do you feel about them? Well, you can't even notice them. They're too boring to look at, isn't it? And that's 99.9% of the universe. And how do you feel about them? Couldn't care less, complete indifference. So indifference is one of the functions of the root delusion, ego grasping. So you've got these are the objects of the 3 main delusions: friend, enemy, stranger. And the world lives like this. No one questions. Ants, dogs, monkeys, humans, we all have our friends, enemies, and strangers. Why? Because we all have attachment, aversion, and ignorance. It's just the way the universe is. It's the model of the universe for the Buddha. Animals the same. Buddhist psychology doesn't just refer to humans, it refers to all beings in the universe. So equanimity is this very profound attitude that we have to cultivate that is simple, very simple. We look at these 3 people right now whom we see through the lenses of our attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Naturally, we never question this. So right now, we do have love. I do want, but only the first category, them to be happy. There's no question. I love my children, my grandchildren, my whoever it is in your life, your beloveds. But as Lama Zopa says, that love is unstable. As we'd say, it's got strings attached. It's contingent upon attachment, and they're doing what your attachment wants. So of course we know it's painful when the children reject you. You still love them. It's very painful to love them. But mostly if someone stops doing what my attachment wants, we give them up. You know, they go into the enemy category, or they maybe go back into the stranger category. That's the normal love that we have. We have love that's dependent on attachment. And that's what they so come together. We assume they're the same, but they're completely different. And there's no logic to it, Buddha says. This is what we're trying to get to. So what's the enemy? You do not love the enemy. You do not want them to be happy. You have to struggle maybe even to stop wanting them to suffer. Because why? Because they don't do what your attachment wants. Or they absolutely did what your attachment didn't want. And that's very clear. And stranger neither. That's it. That's the universe. So where's the lack of logic here? So the point is in this little contemplation that we've been just discussing, even now, just thinking it through. There's no basis in reality here. It's completely artificial projections. So what we're trying to do in this equanimity is get ourselves out of the equation. Sitting here and you have these three people in front of you, and stop seeing them through the lenses of your needs. See them as three separate people, separate from you, which they are. But we're so familiar with these three ways of categorizing. In fact, there's no fourth category on this planet. Think about it. There's only those you're attached to, have aversion for, and couldn't care less about. This is proving Buddha's point, the three poisons, you know. So what's artificial about it? Because, like I said earlier, we paint these three people with the brush of whatever's the major delusion in our mind. And we see that as the person. So if you're in love with Fred, you think he's divine, you think he's an angel. Well, check it out, his ex-wife. What does she think of him? She's got him in the enemy category, and all she sees is all the monstrous things he's done. Now, if I haven't met, listen to this example, before I meet Fred, he's a stranger to me, isn't it? So I was just this example. Let's say he's got migraines. Sorry, I haven't said what equanimity is, what we're trying to prove. Equanimity, very precisely, such that when you've got it, is a heartfelt recognition that friend, enemy, and stranger are identical to each other from one point of view. They're identical to each other from one point of view. They each want to be happy, and they each don't want to suffer. Now, straight away, we hear this. We're shocked. Let's say you hate Mr. Trump. I mean, if you're an American and you don't like Mr. Trump, maybe you adore Mr. Trump. Depends on who you are. You put him in the friend or the enemy category, one or the other. Never in the stranger one, I tell you. Let's say he's in your enemy category. And you hate all his politics. You hate all the things he's done, let's say. And then you hear that Mr. Trump is exactly the same as, you know, your beloved grandchild in wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer. We can't even hear it. Do you know why? Because it's based on, for us, on deserve. What do you mean Mr. Trump wants to be happy? He doesn't deserve it. What do you mean my ex-husband wants to be happy? He doesn't deserve it. Now, this is so linked for us. We don't even notice. I'm prepared for someone to be happy, but they'd better deserve it, baby. And how do they deserve it? By doing my wishes. I mean, we should be embarrassed at how self-centered we are, but this is how we see the world. And we don't question. We think it's normal. So it takes a lot of unpacking to get to see the logic in this. So Mr. Trump is driven by the wish to be happy every second, by the wish not to suffer. Everybody, it's so primordial, it's so fundamental, it's so simple, it's so beyond anything. It's just fundamental truth. This is what we're trying to recognize, to get to the one thing that all beings share, the one thing all beings in the universe share. Their wish to be happy every second, and their wish every second not to suffer. It's quite a hard one to get to, but you won't get it until you know it for yourself, and that's in the junior school and high school. You will not get this for others if you don't get it for yourself. You're driven to be happy and not suffer, and all you're doing is trying to abide by Buddha's laws to help you get happiness and stop suffering. You've got to know it for yourself first. Then you can see it in others. So in other words, this equanimity, once you've got it, heartfelt recognition that they're equal from this point of view, They're not equal in terms of goodness. They're not equal in terms of beauty. They're not equal in terms of anything else, but they're equal in this point of view, just this one. To say, oh, everyone's equal is too vague. Equal in terms of wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer. That's the fundamental one. So when you start to see that, this now becomes the basis of your wanting them to be happy. So wanting them to be happy is called love. Right now, I do want you to be happy. I do love you, but only if you do what my attachment wants. And I don't love you and don't want you to be happy if you don't do what my attachment wants. And I don't care either way if you do neither. That's the logic now of ego, which is illogic. So we're trying to use this simple logic. So it's quite primordial, it's quite subtle, this point of equanimity, to recognize this as a starting point, to want to gradually build love, compassion, great compassion for every one of them. It's pretty profound, you know, and it's very precise, not just vague emotional feelings, step by baby step, you know. So these different practices you go through, gradually get to the point where we do the exchanging self or other, and then eventually we do that amazing meditation called Tonglen. That's about the 9th or 10th. And then that culminates in this accomplishment of bodhicitta, where you've made this paradigm shift now, where others are more, all others, enemies, friends, and strangers are more important than you. And you have this unbelievable aspiration to only benefit them. And it's not just a whimsical feeling, it's a profound, stable realization. And then you move on after that bodhicitta, having Tonglen as one of the major techniques that culminates in it, you know. We'll go into that. And then that leads you to the next level of your practice, where you now perfect from life after life after life, bopping in life after life, practicing the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. The first 4 are the accomplishment of the compassion wing, working in relation to sentient beings directly to actively benefit others by practicing generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance. And then in your meditation, cultivating the 5th and the 6th ones. Concentration meditation is the 5th, and the 6th is insight into emptiness, using the king of logics called dependent arising. And then you become Buddha. So when you start to read, you know, these practices about Tonglen and all this business, it's kind of like too shocking. I mean, they really, I can't almost talk about these practices. It's too shocking that you can't believe that people like this can exist. You can't even see the benefit of it. It seems too outrageous, you know. So maybe the way to really express the outrageousness of this level of practice, let's go through the simple little text. It's called literally, usually they're very poetic Tibetans. This is so boring. It's called the 8 verses of mind training, transforming your mind. And it's taught at this level of this, where you're making this paradigm shift of wanting to smash your own delusions because they are the barrier between you and developing this infinite love and compassion for all sentient beings. You're so driven by this wish to benefit others. It's hard to hear this. It's hard to hear that this level of compassion is possible. It's all there in the literature, you know, all described. And that's why it's so inspiring to see examples of it. It gives you courage. It makes you realize, wow, it's possible. I mean, you know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama for me is such an amazing example, because he just looks like, he makes an effort to appear like a regular person, you know. He's hilariously funny. More and more he's had contact with the West, which is now 50 years, right? His way he answers things, he's so down to earth, he's so funny. I mean, people all revere him. And I remember teaching, he might say, you know, someone asks this complicated question, and he'll look and he'll say, I don't know. And then give me another question. He'll just crack jokes. One time I remember somebody gave this long story about how his husband was so mean to him, or his brother was mean or something. What'll I do? And His Holiness laughed and said, I'd tell him to go to hell. I mean, he's hilarious. He just cuts through all the holy business, you know. He's just so wonderful. He makes an effort to appear like an ordinary person. Now, okay, what is he? All the Tibetans, worth their salt, will tell you he's a Buddha. Now, how would I have no clue in hell if he's a Buddha? I'm not clairvoyant. I'm happy to see him as a Buddha. Very advantageous, yes. But what do we see? This is the thing, it's very encouraging. What do we see? Well, listen, you know, he's 85 right now, 86 this year. He was 15 when he took on the job of running Tibet. Can you try and imagine, please? You're in the midst of this war. It's like you imagine in England when Mr. Winston Churchill came along. Imagine a 15-year-old Mr. Winston Churchill taking over, running his country in the beginning of this nightmare. He took over the job of running Tibet at the age of 15, you know, and he hasn't stopped. That's 70 years, 71 years. He hasn't stopped trying to change the world, trying to change Tibet, trying to help Tibet, and now trying to change the world. And he works diplomatically, socially, politically, religiously. He works in every, scientifically, he works in every area of the world, and he hasn't stopped, and he still continues. And he's perky and funny and optimistic and cracks jokes about his enemies. Now, I mean, we just go, oh, that's the Dalai Lama. That's just who he is. You know, he must be a Buddha. Stick him up on a pedestal. Don't be so rude. He's a living example of every word we're saying here. We shouldn't just take him for granted, you know. Of course, he'll deny any realizations because, I mean, he can't afford not to. If he starts saying he's a Buddha, people are just going to think he's a wacko, you know. But it's very funny. Tibetans have this very powerful method, which is so marvelous. This very powerful approach of incredible humility. You'd never admit to being a yogi. You'd never admit to any realizations. When you talk about all these things in the teachings, you always talk about it objectively, which is a marvelous quality because, you know, you're not sitting there sounding like you're being arrogant, which is what we love to do in our culture. As soon as we know anything, we put our hand up. I know something. They will deny, you know. So they're always saying, oh, they know nothing. It's the way they teach. But it backfired one time. And this is a very moving story. It was in America years ago. And at one teaching, he was talking in this way. And then some fellow is in tears and saying, well, listen, Your Holiness, if you don't know anything, what hope do we have? And he kind of backstepped a bit and said, well, I do know a few things. It was sort of so sweet, you know. And he realized that, I mean, these Tibetan Lamas are like this now. They realize it doesn't help us. We don't need to be hearing about they don't know anything all the time. We need to hear that they do know something because we don't understand this approach, you know. I mean, all the Tibetans have such faith in the Dalai Lama. They're happy to know that he's really a Buddha, although he keeps saying he's nobody. They're not fooled by that. We don't know what to do with that, you know. So I find it so amazing, and this is my observation, I could be wrong. Over the years when he teaches in public, especially to Westerners, he's completely changed his approach. He always brings himself into it, which they normally never do. He talks about when he was 15, he thought this, and then he was about 20, he realized this, and later on I did this and did that, and I sort of felt, began to really understand this one. That's what works for our minds, you know. It's not being arrogant, he's very humble, but it gives us courage. If he can do it, we can do it too, you know. But what I'm getting at is, he's an example. I mean, of 70 years of unbelievable suffering. His country is destroyed. There are 10 times more foreigners than Tibetans there now. The country it was the most pristine place. They knew there was no such thing as environmentalism in Tibet. Why should there be? Nobody interfered with the environment. It was one of the most rich, you know, in minerals and natural resources of any place on the planet. It's been ripped to pieces. It's been gutted, you know. And now there's famine, there's destruction, there's, you know, unbelievable suffering. His Holiness is in tears when he even thinks about all the wild animals that are destroyed, you know. I mean, they left the animals alone because they had this, because if you live a life of trying to be humble, have no attachment, no anger, no jealousy, no harming, no greed, of course the environment benefits and all the animals benefit, you know. It's just unbearable, the suffering. But he hasn't given up in the face of this suffering. And he's like their mummy, he's like their daddy, you know. We should be moved by that. We should be, I mean, we stick him up on a pedestal. I mean, God Almighty, if like as you're seeing Federer, you don't, oh, that's just Federer. He just plays tennis. No, he's showing you that you can play tennis. That's what he's doing. If he can learn to play tennis, so can you. And you get some enthusiasm. Well, if the Dalai Lama can be like this in the face of nightmare of suffering, still every day Tibetans are coming over the mountains in tears and they come to His Holiness in Dharamsala weeping, you know. Every day he's in tears when he sees the suffering of his people. Every day now, since 60 years, they're still escaping every day. Every day they come to Dharamsala and they spend their life coming just to see him. And he's in tears, but he never gives up. He's got enthusiasm, he's got clarity, because he's done the work. He's done the first scope, he's done the second scope, he's got bodhicitta, he's perfected them, and he's now a Buddha. And he never gives up. So it should be inspiring to us, you know. That's the example of a bodhisattva. That's the example of a Buddha. I want to be like that. What must have he done to be like that? You look at Federer, what must have he done to be like that? I want to do it too. It's the example right in front of us. So there's all these different lamas with different examples, you know. I mean, he's famous, so he's got a particular approach. Lama Zopa is a completely different aspect. He shows like he never sleeps. As Roger said, his attendant, for Rinpoche, sleep is a disgusting waste of time. So the best I can do when I go to bed, I love my bed at night. I do my practice here. My little bed's just over there on my couch. I don't like living in beds. I live on couches. I sleep on a couch because I'm short, so it fits me nicely. And I love my bed at night. I sink into this delicious sleep and go to sleep. Beds are delicious, especially when you get older, aren't they? What else you got to look forward to but sleep? It's so delicious. And I'm looking forward to my sleep. So I can't even pretend never to sleep because he meditates all night. He doesn't lie down, you know. And one of the best I can do is I sink into my bed to go to sleep. The best I can say to myself is, may I find sleep disgusting. Hopefully program my mind. Maybe next life I won't have to sleep so much. I can't pretend I can do it yet, but you can aim for it, you know. Anyway, we're sort of talking the 6 perfections here. But using as examples, you know, using these examples. So Lama Zopa to me, when I hear his teachings, when I see his example, I see all his projects, I see how he behaves. He's an example. He's a living example of these bodhisattvas. So it makes it's like if you read a book about tennis, but you never see a tennis player, you wouldn't have much confidence that it's possible, is it? But you see one tennis player, you go, wow, look, it's real, it's true, it's possible. Same with these bodhisattvas, you know. That's why we need teachers. We need somebody who's living in front of us, showing us exactly, that's how I can become. We need that badly, you know. We need that. So important. So you read the books about it, you read the text of the qualities of a bodhisattva, it sounds like science fiction. So this last 20 minutes, and we'll go through these 8 verses, just as a way of describing these outrageous approaches, the most advanced approaches of transforming problems into happiness, basically, which culminate in this amazing bodhicitta. So I'll just give you the verses roughly. I won't say the exact words. This is my mind. I'll just the rough meaning of each one. First one. Hang on, excuse me. The first one says something like, in order to get the benefit from all sentient beings, and that sounds like a mistake. We think it should mean in order to get the benefit for all sentient beings, but it's from all sentient beings. And what that means is this: who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, the first 2 lines, okay? So what does it mean in order to get the benefit from? It sounds like you're using sentient beings, and they talk about it like this. So what we're trying to do here in these verses is develop incredible compassion. We're trying to get bodhicitta. So what's the basis of compassion? Is suffering sentient beings. If you never met a suffering sentient being, how could you possibly ever accomplish compassion? You need suffering sentient beings. If you want to be the best surgeon on the planet, you need people with broken bones. So best for you to go to, you know, the Doctors Sans Frontières, into the war zones. You're gonna need those broken bones to become the best surgeon possible. Same here. In order to get bodhicitta, you need to be around suffering sentient beings. In that sense, in order to get the benefit from all these suffering sentient beings, who are, there's a second line, who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Now, excuse me, what does that mean? What's that telling us? It sounds so weird. What's driving all these verses is this, I mean, it's like getting bodhicitta, but the level of compassion that's here already is so unbelievable, it's hard to hear it. You're going to go through the verses and you'll see what I'm saying. But this first one's already outrageous. That all sentient beings are more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Forget wish-fulfilling jewels, okay? Just put £1 million. Very simple. Think of these words literally. What the hell is he talking about? This Mr. Lungri Tangpa, who wrote these verses. 8th century, 10th century Tibetan, 11th century something, 11th century maybe. A student of Dromtompa, who was a student of Atisha. What does he mean literally? Or, you know, in order to get the benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than £1 million to me. What does that mean, please? You can't even get your head around it. Well, this is where you've got to understand you're so driven to be the best surgeon in the universe. You're so driven by such compassion. You're so driven by such compassion day and night to be the best surgeon because you want to heal every single person, that the more war zones you go to, every one of those people is more precious to you than £1 million, because on the basis of you, those suffering sentient beings, you can become the best surgeon possible, which means it's your method to become a Buddha, which means you're qualified to help everybody. Now, who's got that level of compassion? It's exhausting just to think about it. The level is too much for the mind, you know. That's the first verse. I will treat them all as most precious, something like that. The next verse says, and this I always joke and say that if you are my therapist, if I'm your therapist and I give you this advice, you could sue me for abuse, I promise you. All these verses, I swear to you. This whole approach of transforming self in I keep forgetting the words. What's it called? What's the word?
Exchange.
Thank you. I think I'm losing my mind. Exchanging self for others. If you this whole approach is so outrageous that they used to be kept secret. These teachings were secret because they're so opposite to the world. It's so true, Remember, Milarepa said, whatever's Dharma is the opposite to the world. Just look at the world and Dharma's opposite, This is like radical opposite. So the next verse says, when you're with others, see yourself as the lowest of all and see others as supreme, essentially that. Now this, in a normal world, being an ordinary person who's got low self-esteem and not much confidence, and to hear that you're supposed to see yourself as the lowest of all, the first thing we'll say is, well, excuse me, mate, I already do that. What do you want, to rub my nose in it? We can't hear it properly, This is why these are more advanced levels of practice. I got to keep stressing that there are levels of practice, So if you're already in that relationship with that friend and you're still feeling overwhelmed and hopeless and a victim, you've got no sense of your own qualities, you've got no understanding, you're full of attachment and neediness and anger and jealousy and resentment, this is not for you, baby. This is too advanced teaching. You already think you're a creep. This is not for you. This is an advanced teaching. In other words, the only person who can hear this teaching properly and practice it properly is a person who's already got renunciation and has unbelievable self-confidence. When you've got renunciation, you are sublimely content. You've got such wonderful qualities. You're self-confident. You're courageous. You're brave. You've lessened your attachment, your aversion, your jealousy. You're a marvelous, content, fulfilled person. This is the only person who can begin to do this. And why would you want to see yourself as the lowest of all? Because the whole thing throughout the entire Bodhisattva path, the main enemy in junior school and high school is called attachment, which is this emotional hunger to get what I want. But it's framed differently on the Bodhisattva path. The main enemy here is called selfishness, or as the Tibetans call it, self-cherishing, putting self first. I mean, we're prepared to admit to attachment. Oh, I'm so attached to chocolate cake, we'll say. But we don't like admitting to being selfish. It sounds very awful to be called selfish, But that's a natural consequence. Attachment is another take on selfishness, that's all. But here, attachment is mainly to calm your attachment down to stop your own suffering. Here, we're trying to cut down selfishness, putting self first, because we're trying to make this paradigm shift of putting others first. That's the whole approach. We're heading to bodhicitta. So the whole attitude that stops us from that is putting self first. So you've got to be conscious to see this. You've got to be aware of this. You've got to want to conquer this, because it's preventing you from becoming a Buddha when you can be of benefit to others, So when you're with others, see yourself as the lowest of all. And you see others as supreme. So this is radical. He's talking about everybody, but try and think of how you practice that in relation to one person at a time. It's profound. And you start with a person, let's say a person at work, let's say somebody in your family, and they annoy you. You don't like them much. This is the way to practice. What you've got to do is, in your mind, you think of one quality that person has, one thing that they can do better than you. I mean it, exactly that. That's how you practice this. So you delight that they are better than you at math, they've got cuter ears, they're thinner, they've got more smooth skin, something simple. Instead of just, oh, I don't like that old Auntie Jo, You just check out, maybe she's got cuter ankles, maybe she's better at math, maybe she's got a lovely laugh. I'm not joking now. This is a powerful way to put it into practice. She's better than me at that. Be precise. And then you put yourself down and you put her up. Just for that one action. That's profound. Try it once a week. It's too vague to say, oh, everybody's superior. It's too much. You're not advanced enough, Make it real. It's very profound. The next one says, basically, it's sort of this one of seeing your mind every second. So you're going to watch your mind like a hawk, and the moment a delusion arises, which will harm you and others, you will quickly avert it. Essentially that. It seems to be coming in sort of, I wonder why the order there, that particular piece there, it's very curious. The next three are outrageous, you know. Each one is, the first one and the second is even more difficult, the third is even more outrageous. So the next one is something like this. It feels to me this is sort of like the world out there, distant from you. So imagine you're in 10th century Tibet. I don't think you're going to have met of many people like this. It says something like, when you see or hear about really crazy, demented, you know, it says a person who's evil. Well, I'd say, let's say we say psychopath. I mean, we read about psychopaths every day. We're drowning in psychopaths in our crazy world. Back in 11th century Tibet, you might have heard about one, you know, 40 miles away. Some crazy person who's driven by delusions, who's full of delusions and suffering. When you think about a psychopath, I mean, that's a good word to put it, how we say it. Crazy, the pedophiles, the terrorists, the murderers, the rapists, you know. I will hold them as most dear. Why would you do that? What's the logic? Because that person is suffering, unbelievably suffering. That's the thing. We can't have this level of compassion until we've got compassion for ourselves in junior school and high school. This is the point. This is why compassion is not enough. Right now, we only have compassion for the little cute victims. We only have compassion for the innocent victims, the little doggies and a few children. But this level, coming from understanding karma, everybody is in the same boat. That's why those young nuns had so much compassion for their own torturers. Same here. So when you realize these crazy people are harming themselves and others, you will hold them as so dear, you know. I forget the exact conclusion each kind, slightly different each time. I'll clarify it tomorrow when I get the text. The next lot is a bit closer to home. My feeling is maybe this is at work, something like that. When you're blamed for something you didn't do. When you're blamed, you will accept the blame and offer the victory to them. Think about that. I mean, look when even someone accuses you of saying something you didn't say, accuses you of breaking their special cup, accuses you of talking too loud, the baby, the tiniest thing. Look at the pain, the hurt. One of the major ways we suffer. Back in karma, we didn't go into much detail. The kind of karma is called experiences similar to the cause, which is how we're seen and treated by other people. And this is the major way we suffer in most of our lives in relation to other people since we're born. All our happiness comes from that as well. So when you're accused of doing something you didn't do, like at work, let's say, this is an incredibly powerful practice. You will accept defeat and offer the victory to them. This is outrageous. I mean, even if we did do something wrong, it's hard to take responsibility. But again, like all these practices, you've got a whole toolkit of tools. You've got a whole medicine cabinet of hundreds of practices. You've got to know which one is appropriate at which time. Maybe it's not appropriate one time, but we've got to know what level of practice you want to practice. Maybe you've got to practice something else. Maybe you've been a little mouse all your life and you're still in junior school and you've got to learn to speak up. Maybe that's your practice. So you've got to know where you're at. We're talking here advanced level practices. So it's up to you. This is outrageous. I always tell the story, always tell this story. I come up with other stories. This is a wonderful story. Some fellow in Sydney had a party and some Buddhists were there and my friend was there. And the story was John, who had the party, he was telling everybody how his brand new BMW had a scratch right along the side doors. So he replaced the doors, quite a lot of money. Then it happened again, like a third time. What'll I do? He said, you know, he discovered the next door neighbor did it. And he'd done nothing wrong. You see, this is how karma works. This is very powerful. We haven't gone into this at all, but this is called experiences similar to the cause. This is what Sunny in prison. She must have had such heavy karma from the past lives, 57 lives ago, of falsely blaming other people. And all those people who she's involved with now, the guys who blamed her, the police, the judges, the prosecutors, everybody, all conspiring to believe she was a murderer when in fact she wasn't. So this one of blaming is so powerful. So he'd done nothing in this life, John, but it's from past life. So this guy thinks he's done something wrong. So he scratches his BMW. So people said, what'll I do? He said, oh, well, one person said, well, you sue him, you scratch his car. And then somebody said, my friend George said, well, I'll tell you what Lama Zopa would do. He would find out what this old guy liked and then give him a beautiful gift and apologize. He'd done nothing wrong, right? Well, John loved this idea. So he found out this old fellow liked golf. So he bought him the best fancy golf balls, wrapped them beautifully, then went to his back door, and then he offered them to him and apologized for whatever he'd done wrong. So he felt good about it. He went back home, had a cup of tea, and he's in the kitchen, and this fellow comes in, beaming from ear to ear, with his gift unwrapped. And he said, this is the kindest thing anyone has done. Thank you so much. Everything is forgiven. I love that story. I mean, this is often what happens at the beginning of like a war between neighbors for the next 47 years, and they end up suing each other. You hear it so many times that. So this is a powerful example. John took the blame and he offered victory. He's a Buddhist, so he understood it. This is, but look at how courageous you have to be. Look at the suffering some of us have, Look at the suffering we have. Look at the way we've been harmed, blamed, brutalized. And I'm talking about people accusing us of doing wrong things in court, trying to take our children away. Terrible things happen to us. And that doesn't always mean if you just give up, oh, well, have my child go away. It's not like that. We've got to know what is the best. But in terms of, so fight for your child's rights, but understand karma, not just intellectually. It's a very powerful practice. Oh my God, it's so difficult. So by having that practice, you put atomic bombs under your own pain and put atomic bombs under the causes, your own past actions. Karma is such a powerful view if we understand it properly and use it properly. It's incredible. The next one is closest to home. It's like your beloved, a person whom I've the words are something like this, whom I've given my life to, whom I've served and honored and loved all my life. They go against me. They give me up. They reject me. I will see them as my precious guru. These are powerful practices. But look at your life and look at everybody you know. Everybody we know has had some suffering at the hands of others. And this is the karma called experiences similar to the cause. If you're lied to, it's because you've lied in the past. If you're stolen from, it's been because you've stolen. If you're accused, it's because you've accused. If you're in prison, it's because you've kept free, you've imprisoned people or creatures. 57 lives ago, maybe. So all of this demands courage and less ego grasping and less fear. And that comes from working in the compassion, in the wisdom wing, working at the first level, controlling your body and speech, working at the seventh level, controlling your mind, and working at the next level, all these kind of practicing, you're loosening the grip all the time of the delusions and ego grasping. And now you get bodhicitta. Now it's time to go home. No time for questions. Have more questions tomorrow, okay? Okay, Lynn, all right, sweetheart? So we just dedicate, use it, we don't put the prayers up, just have our own words, think the words, the dedication prayer, which is that all these seeds we've planted this last 4 hours, 5 hours, as many thoughts as we've had, as many seeds we've planted. And we think maybe nourish these seeds from this moment forward. They're all not gone astray, they're all in the mind. So we're going to nourish them with our practice every second, every second, every second. So we do, so that all these seeds will manifest, no matter how long it takes, in the future as our Buddha, as our own Buddhahood. Then we're really qualified to help others. How amazing. And then may bodhicitta, this amazing aspiration, grow and grow in the hearts of all. Kewa di nyudo dag lama sange drupgyone drowa chikyang malupa deyi salagapa shok. Jangchob semchog Rinpoche, ma ke panam ke gyuchik, ke panyampa me payang, gong ne gong du pelva shok. Okay.